Get started. Good evening, everybody. Sounds so quiet because no one has wine yet, so we'll have it at 6:30 or 6:45. So today's program is a new format. Our new co-chairs. Actually, I'll introduce Ajay Shah is here. He's our co-chair for Growth Company Forum. This is part of one of the programs we have in the Thai ecosystem here. And today's format is basically divided into two sections. First is the workshop by Krishna Pulluri, and then second one will be a panel which our Ujjal, successful entrepreneur and executive and our moderator, as well as charter member, will be hosting at 7:30. That will begin. So this workshop is from 5:30 to 6:45, and then we'll have a break. That's when you can get the wine and food. Then we'll have the panel. So anyway, I'd like to just quickly I just asked Krishna, is there anything raunchy you would like me to tell about himself? He's just being humble. He said no one needs to know anything about him. So so Krishna is a successful entrepreneur, and he's been in Silicon Valley for a number of years in EDA as well as a number of other industries in marketing, engineering, and now he's become an author, and he's written a book called ABCs of Entrepreneur Voice he'll talk about. So with that, I'll just hand it over to Krishna, and let's give him a big round of applause.
Can you guys hear me okay? Yes. Yeah? All right, so I'll expand on my background a little bit more. I started my career at a company called Daisy Systems, which was in electronic design automation. Serious software for which you get paid peanuts. So that's the story of what they call the EDA industry. And then I was an engineering manager at Cadence Design Systems. Probably heard more about that one. And then back in 1995, I got this itch that I don't want to be an engineer, sitting in my cube and writing code or managing just engineering projects. I walked up to my boss and I said, I hate this, I want to do an MBA. So he didn't have an MBA, so he had his biases. So he said, well, Joe Costello doesn't have an MBA, Bill Gates doesn't have an MBA, I don't have an MBA. I said, yeah, smart move, putting yourself in those brackets, right? But he said, one of the first things you should do is learn how to sell. So quit your job and see if you can sell yourself. Offer consulting services. If you don't know how to sell, it's hard to be an entrepreneur. So I quit my job the next day. And initially I had this naive idea that I would develop a business plan, great grand business plan sitting on the beach, and then come out with it and become a Microsoft. After 1 month, I didn't make any progress. So I started consulting. Then I realized how I could create a multiplier effect in consulting. I took a multi-million-dollar project from Cadence, where I didn't have to work. 30 other guys were working, producing very good results, and I was making money. So that was my first foray into entrepreneurship. And then we started a product business, enterprise software, sold it to Cadence at the end of it. And then I've been marketing executive in both EDA and in digital media most recently, where the software checked the digital content that you see on your TV to make sure everything was okay. So that's my background. I wrote this book because when I was an entrepreneur or wanted to be an entrepreneur, I could not find one book that gave me a quick idea about various aspects of entrepreneurship. There were books on marketing, gorilla marketing, chimpanzee marketing, monkey marketing. So I got tired of reading all the books. So I said, let me write one book. And the other reason I wrote the book is because it is, with the internet now, anybody can be an entrepreneur. You have a simple laptop, small development environment, you can develop stuff. And you don't even need revenue sometimes. Instagram got $1 billion with 12 people and no revenue. So, that's the time of excitement now. All right, why don't we get started? I like to make this very, very interactive. So please don't look at me as somebody who just bullshits here. Ask questions, and I will pick on you guys and ask questions. So if you don't like to be asked any questions, you shouldn't be looking at me. All right, so thanks to Ty for setting this up. We are on the build phase right now, and that's what I'm going to talk about. The title of the book I wrote is called Engineer to Entrepreneur, The First Flight. All right. Does this work? All right, one of the first things I wanted to talk about is what are some of the key foundations entrepreneurs need. Many of you know this, and you might find it repetitive, but I think it's important to revisit this before you get started on entrepreneurship. Before I get started, how many of you are in early stages of starting your companies? And how many of you have started and you're well into the process? Okay. How many of you are in enterprise software area? And how many in consumer, internet? So yeah, good spread here, okay? So please ask questions relevant to your effort, industry, without spilling the magic sauce, and we'll go from there. One of the first things you need to do as an entrepreneur, you need to venture beyond the obvious. If you're doing things that others do, then you really are not creating any position of advantage for yourself. So you need to get that unfair advantage. Between you and your prospective customers, there's a wall. Where is the crack in the wall? And if there's no crack, could you move 2 steps to the right or left, and maybe you see the whole customer? You have to think that way. You cannot say, somebody else is doing it, let me do the same thing. I can write better software, I can develop a better chip, I can come out with a much better design, and hope to get in. MP3 players are a classic example where entrenched market leader Creative Labs got booted out in 1 quarter by Apple because one had technology, one had solution, okay? And there are multiple MP3 players that came after that with low cost, didn't do anything for it. So it's important that you get an unfair advantage where your competition becomes less relevant. You cannot make them irrelevant, they're there, right? But you have to make them less relevant to what you do, who you target. Once you have that opening, you can get through it and start pushing, widening the opening for yourself. So there's a famous book called Blue Ocean Strategy. If you get a chance, read it. They talk about how to do it with multiple examples. One of the best books I've ever read. So that's one of the first traits you need as an entrepreneur. The second one is you have to have a winner's mindset. Many times if you look at people, when somebody is optimistic, everybody wants to be with them. When somebody is down and negative all the time, nobody wants to go there. So it's a very simple thing. You attract people, your team, investors, customers, when you're optimistic. And second thing is you need to have the connection to the customer. If you look at the celebrities, they behave based on who they cater to. Kim Kardashian, she caters to a different crowd and she behaves that way. Roger Federer caters to a certain crowd, he behaves that way. Your behavior is completely decided based on who your customer is. If you don't know your customer, you're going to be flip-flopping all over the place. So it's important. So if you're connected to the customer, then your solution is going to be connected to the customer. Okay? And the next thing is, does this work? All right. You have to be business aware. With the winner's mindset, you need to know what's the path of least resistance to your paying customer, not the customer. It's not always true that your customer is the one that writes the check for you. Classic example is the internet companies. You look at the end customer that comes and uses the site for free, they're not writing the check. The advertisers are writing the check. Okay? So you need to know who is your customer and what does it take to get to your paying customer directly or indirectly. And the last thing is, it doesn't have to be immediate. If you don't have a plan to monetize your offering, then you're just waiting for an Instagram-like luck. So you have to think monetization either now or a little later, but you have to think. Because if you don't know how to get paid for what you do, you don't have anything worth paying for. It's a simple rule. Okay? Any questions? Please challenge if you don't agree. I think it's a great way to get the discussion going. All right, so these are the three I thought I will highlight based on my experiences and what I've seen others do. Now, let's get into what does it take to build a company from scratch. These are the 6 topics I thought we should cover today. You know, if you have an idea or if you don't, how do you assess the market opportunity, risks, and the commercial viability of it? And the second thing is, when you start with the team, how do you make sure everything gels together? Next, how do you get your solution to come up and exploit the leverages? These days, you don't develop the whole thing. You develop what I call as a top layer or a magic sauce and get your offering to the market very quickly. Whether it's a table you're developing, okay, you buy the unfinished furniture, paint it, put your signature on it, and it becomes a different offering. You have software, it's the same thing. So there is a leverage in the marketplace today that you cannot ignore. If you do, you're going to spend a lot more time and money and may or may not succeed with that. The next thing is, for most engineers, how many of you are engineers here? That's great. So when I speak, that's the majority, okay? So others, please don't get offended, please. A lot of the engineering, when I was an engineer, I had this perception that once I develop the software, that damn thing will sell, man. I don't need no stupid marketing and sales guys. Only after I made the switch, I realized that they're actually important. When I had my company, I had to learn marketing and sales in a trial and error manner. And partly also, the problem is most marketing guys you see are pretty useless. You know, they just wear a suit and bring, slides. So I think it's important as an engineer to learn a little bit of this so you can drive the agenda yourself long enough before you bring in a professional and even understand how to bring the right people into the organization. And one of the very important things, first time when you go out and you start selling, do you do a reality check and make sure you have course correction? Are you still on the same page that you started? And have you started deviating intentionally or unintentionally? The last thing is, to raise money, funding, what are some of the basics you need to know? Does this seem like a good enough list of things? All right, so please ask questions, and I will ask you questions, okay? All right, so the first one, idea or not. So on the top, when you see the red box, that's the category that we are covering. So this is one of the most overlooked aspect of engineer-started companies. They don't spend enough time assessing the idea. If you don't do that, then 1 degree of error at the beginning becomes a 90-degree deviation later. So you spend more time here, you will be thankful. So you have the idea. How did you get the idea? Is it a reactive idea or a proactive idea? Okay? Because they have both certain advantages and disadvantages. The second dimension is, what's the market impact potential of your idea? Is it just an incremental impact where you're adding something? Is it a displacement where you're displacing something? Or is it disruptive? It completely redefines the entire market. If you don't know that, for example, if you have an incremental idea and you go try to raise money and some desperate VC gives you money, guess what? Both of you are in it for the wrong reasons and you screw. So you need to know what you have before you go making noise about it. And third, wind tunnel test. For engineers, this is very difficult. It's hard when people call their baby ugly, so they don't ask anybody. They say, I got the best thing in town, and I was like the top student in my class, I must be doing it right. It's important for you to check out with customers, competition, and industry. Competition is very important, okay? You need to know how to talk to your enemies. The good thing is they come from the front. Friends sometimes come from the back, but enemies always come from the front. You talk to them and you can get information. And you should not be defensive when you talk to them. So these are the three dimensions we'll go a little bit detail into. So let's start with the first one. All right, this is more reliable. So first is the origin of ideas. When you have a reactive idea, the good thing is it's an existing problem in a known issue. You're not trying to solve a problem that you did not see. That's a great thing, right? But the unknown is you don't know the scope of problem and how many times it happens or how big it is. So for example, if you came out with a fantastic birthday card for somebody who's born on February 29th in a leap year, because they were complaining and you came out with a card and they loved it, guess what? That's a very small set of people that can ever get there. Or if somebody is blessed with a sixth toe on their right foot or left foot, and you created something beautiful for it, few people, right? These are corner cases. You need to know that the problem you saw that you want to solve is a little more general, has a potential to even become a bigger problem, and you have that opening that we were talking about. That's a great thing actually, because a lot of engineers try to solve problems that may not be problems. Right? It's a great start, but you need to know how big it is. And the next thing is proactive idea. The great thing, it's a broad opportunity, you know it's big. How big is it? Well, where do you start? What's your initial focus? If you don't have an initial focus, you are thrashing. You're going all over the place trying to boil the ocean. And this is also not easy to focus on one thing, because when you focus and you go to the customers, let's say you run into issues, immediately you'll pull back and say, no, not this, this. So you're thrashing. You're going all over the place trying to hit that sweet spot. So you need to think through and say, what's my initial focus? And if you don't have it, it's a problem. I was actually talking to one of the aspiring entrepreneurs, and I said, okay, what are you trying to do? He said, I'm trying to create a low-end package for retailers and replace Oracle solution. So I said, okay, what does your solution do? He said, well, I got a great framework. It can do anything. All you need to give me is what you want to do, and 3 weeks, and I'll make it happen. I said, are you in products business or services business? He said, products, licensed products. That didn't sound like a product business. And for low end, you cannot go into that kind of business because you need more of a shrink wrap approach where the customer very easily installs it and makes it work. So he was trying to boil the ocean. He couldn't figure out which one he would focus on and get the first solution going. Let's look at the dimension number 2, market impact. Now, as we talked about it, the market impact can be 3 different levels, incremental. So let's take the standard sunglasses problem, okay? Somebody has prescription glasses and they want to have goggles. So incremental solution to that is keep on sunshades. You put on top of that, that works, it's $5 and you're done, okay? But the same problem, if you take it to the next level and say, what's a displacement impact idea for this? With the transition lens glasses, the prescription guys commanded a premium and they started encroaching into the goggles. So it displaces the need for sunglasses. Okay, that's a displacement impact. You're displacing what's existing. So that's the next level. The last level is, when this works, it's disruptive impact. It completely creates a shift where all the existing solutions are irrelevant. So if you have this LASIK surgery now, it completely removes the need for prescription glasses. So entire basis is taken away and they have disrupted the whole market. And there are countless examples in each category, but you have to get some idea where you belong in this. So just for fun, let's take an example of desktop computer. Some of you are probably, you're too young to know this, but we'll start. Long time ago, for the computers, you had to have a network cable, a separate screen, storage and machine together or separately, a keyboard, mouse, and a projector if you wanted to present something from your computer. Okay? These were individual boxes. The first incremental impact came on that one with a Wi-Fi and a wireless keyboard and mouse that came up. What did they do? They add to the existing infrastructure, but they provided this convenience of less wires and more access everywhere. That's an incremental impact. You have a computer at home, you unplug the keyboard, you unplug the network cable, and you're still working. Okay? Then came the cost-effective laptops and iMacs that said, all this belongs together. That's a displacement impact, because what they've done, they made you throw away what you have here and buy the same thing again. Everything is in that box, and all of these individual components are gone. So it's less components and compact design. Let's for a minute dream about potential disruptive impact. Some of it is already true today. Let's say you have a mobile phone which can project a screen one way and a keyboard on the other side with a mouse. 2 projections. And all the work you do is automatically stored on the cloud somewhere. You don't need any of the existing infrastructure now. Literally, you take your cell phone out, you put it on the table, you got the keyboard on this side, it's projecting the screen on that side, and you work, and you say send, it goes. It's on the cloud. That's a disruptive impact, that it's going to make all the existing solutions irrelevant. It has shifted the whole thing. Yeah, go ahead.
Is for enterprise space, would it be fair to say the startups should focus on the middle one, the displacement?
It's not about what you should focus on. It's about what you have and where it fits. You don't plan based on what space you're in. You assess what you have and think about what impact it can have. For example, if you're in a disruptive idea space, let's say you have an idea that's potentially disruptive to the market, it does take more money, more time, more marketing muscle to sustain long enough to create that tsunami and actually cash on that one. If you're not careful, you create the tsunami and somebody else rides it, right? But let's say the displacement, sometimes partnerships with big companies could lead to a very interesting synergy there. But if it's incremental, you don't want to make a big deal about it. You want to quietly create a lifestyle income and make a good living out of it. So there are pros and cons to each of those, but you don't decide that based on the space you're in. You decide that based on your idea. Okay? All right, so I hope this gives you an idea. We're actually going to take the third example and do an analysis based on a framework in the second half of this. Okay? And any questions, please ask. All right, so what are some of the disruptive impact samples? Disruption happens sometimes when you integrate a lot of components for simplified use. Before, about 10 years ago, home theater was an audiophile's dream. They would sit there with 100 components. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
My question is, suppose I have a disruptive idea, and I'm a guy who is very limited on resources. So how will I expose my idea to the world? Because I know there are people who know if they know that idea, they'll make it faster than me, they'll make it better than me, and my idea will be gone. So how will I protect my idea in case I have a disruptive idea?
Well, there's 2 approaches to it. One is if you have a disruptive idea, you have to take it to some level of life in it. So you could file for patents and then start exposing it to investors, etc. If that's not the case, then the other possibility, if you have a disruptive idea, is there are a lot of big companies that do what they call spin-ins, spin out and spin in. You go pitch to them if you know them well enough and say, fund me, I'll go there, it's something that you can take advantage of and you can bring me back in. But there's nothing like a disruptive idea that it's so easy to copy. If it's a disruptive idea, copying should not be that easy. Sometimes it is, sometimes. If it's just a business model that you tweaked and it's amazing, right? Sort of what Google did. Until then, search was free, but there was no way to monetize it, and the search companies were not accountable to the advertisers. They didn't really give anything back, saying, I showed your ad this many times, this is what happened. The moment Google came in, they said, it's accountable advertising. You advertise and I'll tell you how many people clicked on it. That was a great thing in those days. Now the analytics are a lot more detailed. But so the idea has to be sufficiently good that it cannot be copied just like that. Okay? So Bose came in and they said one box, one button, you have home theater working. And before that, it had to be 15 components and a lot of fine tuning. So it wasn't easy. So they completely took over the whole thing. Of course, now you have a lot of copycats that sell you $200 home theaters, but people are still paying $2,500 for Bose. So they've done many other things right in addition to that. Same thing with MP3 players. You can carry 500 CDs in your pocket. There's no skip when you run. So it's a great thing. Digital camera, instant results. You take a picture, you see how it looks. You don't have this thing that you have to develop and then find out what's wrong. So these tend to be disruptive because they just change the entire ease of use or adoption or solid innovation. So these are some samples I wanted to give you on disruptive impact because being engineers, we always think our idea is disruptive. It's a sexy thing to talk about, but it's not always disruptive. All right, and the third thing, the wind tunnel test. When you have a good idea, as an entrepreneur, you need to talk outside. You cannot just sit in your cocoon and say, I'm smart and hence I'm doing good. The more you talk, the more you learn. You don't have to spill the beans when you go, but you have to talk. You have to make people talk and spill their beans. That's part of being an entrepreneur. So the first thing you have to do is do a wind tunnel test on the customer ecosystem. And the reason you want to do that is when I say ecosystem, it's not just your solution. A lot of times your solution is part of a big thing that the customer uses. And if you're solving just the problem that you targeted, the solution may be incomplete, the adoption may be painful, and the integration may be lacking. So you need to understand the customer ecosystem and say, do I need to be integrated with other social media? Do I need to be integrated with Outlook contacts, for example? And if it's an enterprise software, do I need to be integrated with the existing Oracle and other systems? If you don't have that, then you're coming up with a great idea that works by itself extremely well, but it doesn't work in the middle of the rest of the stuff that the customer uses. Okay? The second thing is you need to do a wind tunnel test even with the competitors. What problem are they solving? What is their solution and what's your differentiation? If you don't know your competitors, then what happens is when you go to the customers, you'll be in for a surprise in a very long sales cycle because you did not start with an unfair advantage. Remember the first thing we talked about. You need an unfair advantage. And the thing is, you also want to know where is the customer strong. Maybe they're strong in Western Europe and United States, and they left Southeast Asia completely open. Maybe that's your flanking strategy. That's where you start. You don't go hit your head against the wall. You move a little bit, and you see this opening, and you run through it. And then you can come back and start displacing them. So it's very important to know where are the holes. Yeah.
In case I have a disruptive idea and you say like you have to develop it a little bit before showing it to the people, right? So suppose I'm not a technical guy, I'm not capable of developing that idea at all. So how will I share that idea to someone who is technically strong? Why won't he steal my idea? I mean, how those people...
You have no choice.
Yeah.
You really don't have a choice. You know, a long time ago, I had an idea like this, and I wasn't sure how to develop. And one of my mentors, he said, when you sell the seeds, you get $1 for the packet. When you sell the plant, which is 6 inches tall, you get $5. When you sell the tree, it's $2,500. And when you sell the fruit, shoot, you make a lot of money forever. So you have to decide what you have. Do you have seeds? Or do you have idea for a seed? That's what gives you this ability to take the value higher and higher.
Excuse me. Sorry, just I could suggest that you might want to use a non-disclosure agreement, and you could speak to people on a confidential basis so that they don't actually steal your intellectual property that way.
Yeah. Sometimes they work, sometimes they'll sign the NDA and they'll still start a company. So you just...
An application first.
Yeah, yeah. So patents are generally a good idea because they have more teeth in them, and we have some of the experts here on that. Okay? Yeah.
So let's say your customer, you understand the customer ecosystem, the customers are different geographies of where you live. So let's say a customer.
You have to turn it on.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. So let's say that your customer is in a different geography from where you live, and you understand the ecosystem and you know the channels to go through, but you see a competitor locally there. You can't quite figure out why this competitor has not penetrated. So could you advise on how you find out, because this competitor is not in a geography, your contacts don't reach into that space. Something is going on that you don't follow, so how do we solve it?
I'll just give an answer, hopefully meets halfway, okay? Two possibilities. One is go back to the customer and say, have you used or considered the solution from XYZ? Or if there's a local trade show for your domain, go there. And just by walking around the competitor's booth, you can get a lot of information on what's happening at that. So there are multiple ways that you could do it. And some of these competitors, what they do in their news and press releases, they talk about customers. You can tap into that customer and say, why did you use it and why are you not using it now? There has to be some connection to the customer without which you cannot do it. It can't be a Google where you say, why are they not using it? So customer is the best guidance, yeah.
How it is finding important for disruptive ideas to break in? Because, for example, for smartphone, Palm was the first mover.
Wait for the mic. Can you wait for the mic?
Right. Okay.
So, Palm was the first mover, and they made the PDA, which was the smartphone. But it was Apple that waited for it to get burned with fighting with Microsoft, finding out the right mix and ecosystem to bring it forward. So they did the timing right. Apple also did iPad, timed it even before the iPad 2, the real tablet came out. They did iPad launch.
I'm not sure if it's just the timing, to be honest with you. I think it has to do with how they connected the dots. If you look at any of the Apple devices, it's not the device that's the best, it's the experience and the interoperability, okay? So if you look at any Apple product you buy today, you're not buying islands of, experience. You're buying the same experience everywhere, okay? You have iTunes account, you have an iPad, you have an iPod, you have an iMac and a laptop. They all sync up just like that. And when you go in, everything you do is seamless. You take a Palm phone, it doesn't have any connectivity or interoperability with the 1,500 laptops that are available. So you have become the integration guy for them, right? So they solved a different problem and not just timing. They solved the whole end-to-end problem.
But they were not the first mover.
Oh yeah, you don't have to be a first mover.
Waited for somebody else to do the next thing.
Absolutely. Panasonic does it very successfully. They are followers, they're not leaders. They say, Sony, you go and I'll be right behind you and I'll take it. Sometimes they're called with ridicule as bottom feeders, okay? But the bottom could be the 90% and top is 10%. It's not that bad. Yeah, we need to speed up, okay? One question, yeah.
So coming to patents, how much an idea should be developed so that we can file the patent? Let's take an example of Facebook. So at what stage in the development of Facebook will a guy will think like, okay, this is the right time, I can file for the patent, and everyone will accept that?
Well, there are different kinds of patents. I won't go too much into it. One is called the idea itself, the innovation, and the other is method, okay? Sometimes they say that the best patents are the ones that you can see violated on a trade show floor. They're the best. You can see it and say, I'm going to sue your pants off, right? If you have a patent, for example, for some efficiency in an algorithm, you don't know if somebody copied it. You can't see it. But in general, the patent office will push you for specifics as much as possible. That's all I can say right now, okay? I've been through the process, it's not easy. Yeah. Okay, and the third one is when the competitors and customers tell you something, that's not the word. The word is industry. You need to know, okay, customers telling you their problem, competitor says, from my vantage point, this is the problem. What do the industry experts think about? And it's very easy to tap into these, by the way. There are a lot of market research articles, reports you can get that give you a pretty good idea what the problem scope is, what the trends are, and even the competitor landscape. And if you have a great idea, you can invest $2,000, $3,000 and buy a report. They give you a lot of detailed analysis. Okay? So this is how you do the wind tunnel test. So let's move on to the next thing, the first crew. How do you make sure the founding team is all aligned? It's important for everybody to sign written agreements and put a commitment. What are the roles and responsibilities? I've seen companies where the title CEO ignited a war because everybody wants to be the CEO. Okay? So if you don't have the clarity written and signed, it can get really ugly. Second thing is company goals. Some people are comfortable creating a lifestyle income company. Every month I get my $10,000 and I'm the CEO. I don't want to be, acquired, or I don't want to go IPO because that's too much of a stress for me. So if one founding member thinks lifestyle and another founding member thinks M&A or IPO, there's a disconnect. And the paths don't cross very well. It leads to a lot of problems, and some of these experts here can tell you that. And the third one is risks. Sometimes when there's no revenue, the founders get very, very nervous. People don't like delayed revenues. That's why a lot of companies get into services, because you provide a service, you get paid right away. But product business is a lot more uncertain, but when it kicks in, you got a cash cow there. So time to first revenue, time to profitability, and maximum time to exit. Some companies don't have an exit for 20 years. Is everybody okay with that? Or some of the guys, like me, I like winning big or failing big. I don't like, going on and, trying to do the status quo thing for years and years. But some people are comfortable. They'll say, we'll never quit. So you have to have agreement on when you quit. And the second thing also becomes a problem. Everybody has a cousin or a friend who's really good. How do you bring them in? Your friend might be, good for you, but I hate him. How do you decide, who comes in and how? So you have to make sure that all of you agree on these. And consultants, for example, are a great way to solve some of the problems. If you're, let's say, looking at some compliance issues, you don't need that person as a full-time person. You can get a consultant who just gives you that spot help for 3 months, done. Okay? You have to be careful with consultants because some of them are really useless. I heard this joke where they bring a cub from jungle, a lion cub, and lock it in and go home. And then this cub is trying to jump out from the top, which is open. This is a circus company. Every time it misses the top by like an inch. And there's a lion, old lion, taking a nap in the next cage. It says, hey, stupid, run diagonally. Then you'll clear the top because you got more distance to run. So it runs, it clears it, and it's running. And the cub comes back and says, what about you? It says, I'm just a consultant. So be careful, okay? A lot of times they'll give you ideas that don't mean anything. So sometimes you're told, bring some veterans from proven startups. Make sure they're committed. Ideally, you want some, skin in the game. Investment, right? Or pay cut. Money speaks wonders, okay? And make sure they don't bring the biases from their earlier pitfalls. Because everybody is, when you get burnt one way, you're always scared of that same thing again and again. It may not be applicable to your company and your situation. And they get stuck on that and they create problems. And veterans from big companies, a lot of these guys are like fish out of the water when you take the brand and the support out. If you're Intel, you have a new product, it rolls out. There's a method to the whole thing. You take all of that out, these guys don't know where to start sometimes. We had a guy in one of the startups that came from a big company, Blue.